8 years later, Special Forces SO Brigade, HQ Barracks, Coruscant, 5 days after the Battle of Geonosis.
Skirata had been detained by Coruscant security force officers, and for once in his life, he hadn't put up a fight. Technically, he'd been arrested, and now he was the most relieved man in the galaxy as well as the happiest. He jumped out of the police patrol speeder and winced at the sharp pain in his ankle as he hit the ground. He'd get that sorted out sooner or later, but now wasn't the time. "Wow, take a look at that," the pilot said. "They're holding off special ops squads there. You sure there's only 6 of them?" "Yeah, 6 is overkill," Skirata said, discreetly patting his pockets and sleeves to make sure the assorted tools of his trade were in place and ready for use. It was just habit. "But they're probably scared." "They're scared?" the pilot snorted. "Hey, you know Fett's dead? Windu topped him." "I know," Skirata said, fighting the urge to ask if he also knew what had happened to little Boba. If the kid was still alive, he needed a dad. "Let's hope the Jedi don't have a problem with all of us Mando'ade." The pilot closed the hatch, and Skirata limped across the barracks landing pad. Jedi General Iri Kamas, hands on hips with his brown robes flapping in the breeze, watched in a way that Skirata could only describe as suspicious. 2 clone troopers waited with him. Skirata thought the Jedi should get his long white hair cut. It wasn't practical or becoming for a soldier to wear his hair to his shoulders. "Thank you for responding, Sergeant," Kamas said. "And I apologize for the manner of your return. I realize your contract is completed now, so you owe us nothing." "Anytime," Skirata said. He noted the blaster-proof assault shields erected across the main entrance. 4 squads of Republic Commando stood behind them, DC-17 rifles ready. He glanced up at the roof, and there were 2 Commando sniper teams spread out along the parapet as well. Yes, if a bunch of Null-class advanced recon commandos didn't want to cooperate, then it would take a lot of equally hard men to persuade them otherwise. And he knew that none of the commandos would be happy about being ordered to do the persuading. They were brothers, even if the Arcs were rather different men at heart. Skirata shoved his hands in his jacket pockets and focused on the doors. "So, what started all this then?" Kamas shook his head. "They're scheduled to be chilled down now that they're back from Geonosis, because nobody can command them." "I can." "I know. Please, get them to stand down. They're even more of a handful than the regular Alpha Batch Arcs, aren't they?" "I know that, Sergeant." "So you wanted the hardest troops you could buy to take on the enemy, and then you got cold feet when they turned out to be too hard?" "Sergeant, I'm a civilian at the moment, actually." Kamas took a silent breath. "Can you get them to surrender? They've shut down the whole barracks." "I can." Skirata wondered if the clone troopers were looking sideways at him, or in the direction they appeared to be facing. You could never tell with their helmets on. "But I won't." "I really don't want any casualties. Are you holding out for an increased fee?" Skirata was a mercenary, but the suggestion insulted him. Kamas couldn't be expected to know how he felt about his men, though. He made an effort not to be annoyed. "Enlist me in the Grand Army of the Republic, and give me back my lads. Then we'll see." "What?" "They're terrified of Chilldown, that's all. You have to understand what happened to them as kids." Kamas gave him an odd look. "And don't even think about mind influence, General." Skirata didn't give up Mott's backside about pay. 8 years spent on Kamino training special forces for the Republic's clone army had made him wealthy, and if they wanted to press more credits on him, that was fine. He'd have a good use for them. But what he wanted most right then, and what had made him happy to return with the CSF officers instead of showing them just how handy he was with a fighting knife, was not being safe in a soft civilian life when his men were fighting a desperate, bloody war. And he needed to be back with them. He hadn't even had the chance to say goodbye when they suddenly shipped out to Geonosis. He'd lasted 5 miserable days without them, days without purpose, days without family.
Very well, Kamos said. Special advisor status. I can authorize that, I suppose.
Skirata couldn't see the commandos' faces behind their visors, but he knew they'd be watching him carefully. He recognized some of the paint schemes of their Kataran armor, Jez from Iowa 3 Squad, and Stoker from Gamma, and Ram from Bravo up on the roof. Incomplete squads. High casualties on Geonosis, then. His heart sank. He began walking forward. He got to the blaster shields, and Jez touched his glove with his helmet.
Nice to see you back so soon, Sarge.
Couldn't stay away, Skirata said. You okay?
It's a laugh a minute, this job.
Kamos called out.
Sergeant? Sergeant! What if they open fire? Then they opened fire.
Skirata reached the doors and turned his back on them for a few minutes, unafraid.
Do we have a deal? Or do you want me holed up in there with them? Because I won't be coming out unless you guarantee them no disciplinary action.
It struck Skirata that Kamos might be the one to fire on him right then. He wondered if his commandos would obey that order if it were given. He wouldn't have minded if they had. He'd taught them to do their job regardless of their own feelings.
You have my word, Kamos said. Consider yourself in the Grand Army. We'll discuss how we're going to deploy you and your men later. But first, let's get everyone back to normal, shall we, please?
I'll hold you to every last word, General. He waited at the doors for a few moments. The 2 sheets of reinforced durasteel parted slowly. He walked in, relieved, and home again at last. No, Kamos really needed to understand what had happened to these men as young boys. He had to, if he was going to cope with the war that had now been unleashed. It wouldn't just be fought on someone else's planet. It would be fought in every corner of the galaxy, in every city, in every home. It was a war not just of territories, but of ideologies. And it was wholly outside Skirata's Mandalorian philosophy, but it was his war regardless, because his men were its instrument, whether they liked it or not. One day, he would give them back something the Kaminoans and the Republic had stolen from them. He swore it.
Ordeka!
He called.
Ordo! You've been a naughty boy again, haven't you? Come here.